The dust swirled around Penelope Reeves's worn boots as she stood in the center of Goldfield, Nevada, watching her mother-in-law's carriage disappear down the rutted Main Street, knowing that woman had just convinced the entire town she was cursed and unfit to remain among decent folk. It was October of 1887, and the high desert air carried the bite of approaching winter. Penelope's hands trembled as she clutched the small carpet bag containing everything she now owned in the world. 3 months had passed since James Reeves died in the mining accident that took 7 men from this unforgiving silver town. And in those 3 months, she had watched the community that once welcomed her turn cold as stone. Margaret Reeves, her late husband's mother, had seen to that with whispers and accusations that grew bolder with each passing week. A good wife would have kept him home that day, Margaret had said just loud enough for others to hear at the general store. A good wife would have sensed the danger. My James had a premonition that morning, but she sent him off anyway. None of it was true. James had kissed Penelope goodbye before dawn, excited about the new vein they had discovered, talking about the house they would build, the children they would have. He had been 26 years old and full of dreams. Penelope had been 23, married for only 14 months, still learning how to make a proper home in this harsh landscape, so different from the green valleys of Ohio where she had been born. The boarding house where she had been staying since the accident had given her notice that morning. Mrs. Henderson had been apologetic but firm. "I cannot have you here any more, dear. It is bad for business. People are talking, and Margaret Reeves is a powerful woman in this town. Her husband owns the largest stake in the Goldfield Mining Company. I am sorry, but you understand." Penelope understood perfectly. She understood that grief was acceptable for a short time, but then a widow was expected to either remarry quickly or disappear. She understood that Margaret blamed her for James's death, because blaming the mine owners, blaming fate, blaming God would not bring her son back. But blaming Penelope gave shape to the formless rage of loss. She understood that in a town where men outnumbered women 5-1, the other wives saw her as a threat now that she was alone and still young. The November sun beat down mercilessly despite the season, and Penelope realized she was simply standing in the middle of the street like a lost child. She needed to move, to think, to plan. The small amount of money James had saved was gone, spent on the burial and 3 months of boarding. She had looked for work, but every shop owner, every household that might have hired her for cooking or cleaning had turned her away. Margaret's influence extended everywhere in Goldfield. Penelope walked toward the edge of town, past the saloons where piano music jangled even at midday, past the assayer's office and the bank, past the last respectable buildings to where Goldfield frayed into scattered tents and ramshackle structures housing the most recent arrivals and those who could afford nothing better. She had no destination, only the knowledge that she could not stand still. A water trough sat outside a livery stable, and she paused to splash her face, trying to wash away the dust and the exhaustion. Her reflection wavered in the water, a stranger's face, thinner than it had been 4 months ago, eyes shadowed with sleepless nights. Her dark hair, once carefully pinned, had come loose in places. She looked like what she was, a woman without prospects in a place that had no use for her. "You planning to drink from that trough, or just admire your reflection?" Penelope jerked upright, water dripping from her chin. A man stood in the stable doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of the sage that dotted the surrounding hills. He wore dusty work clothes, a battered hat pushed back on his head, and an expression that seemed more curious than mocking despite his words. "I apologize," Penelope said, stepping back from the trough. "I did not mean to trespass." That trough's for anyone who needs it, horses and people alike, the man said. He moved closer, and she noticed he walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. You look like you have been walking in this sun too long without water. There is a pump inside with a proper cup if you would rather not drink like a mare. Something in his directness steadied her. He was not looking at her with pity or suspicion, just basic human concern. Thank you, she said. I would appreciate that. She followed him into the dim coolness of the stable, where the smell of hay and horses provided an oddly comforting familiarity. He worked the pump handle until clear water gushed into a tin cup, then handed it to her without ceremony. Penelope drank deeply, not realizing how thirsty she had been until the water touched her lips. I am Owen Zimmerman, the man said when she had finished. I work here, and I have a small spread about 5 miles out where I am trying to raise horses when I am not mucking out stalls for other people's animals. Penelope Reeves, she replied automatically, then watched his expression shift as recognition flickered across his face. You are the widow, he said, not unkindly. The one Margaret Reeves has been making life difficult for. Penelope felt her spine stiffen. You have heard about me then. Hard not to hear in a town this size, Owen said. He leaned against a post, studying her with those steady gray eyes. For what it is worth, I think the whole situation is horseshit. Pardon my language. A man dies in a mine collapse and somehow his widow gets blamed for it. Margaret Reeves has always needed someone to be angry at. She went through 3 house girls before her son married you, firing each one for imagined offenses. The casual validation of her experience, after months of doubt and isolation, nearly broke Penelope's composure. She blinked rapidly, refusing to cry in front of this stranger. Thank you for saying so. Most people in Goldfield seem to think differently. Most people in Goldfield do not think at all. They just follow whoever has the most money and the loudest voice, Owen said. He straightened, wincing slightly as weight came onto his bad leg. Where are you headed? I heard Mrs. Henderson gave you notice. News travels fast, Penelope said bitterly. Always does. Owen crossed his arms, waiting. Penelope realized she had no answer to give him. Where was she headed? She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. Her own family back in Ohio had disowned her when she married James against their wishes. They had wanted her to marry the banker's son, a safe, prosperous match, and they had told her that if she ran off with a silver miner heading west, she need not bother coming home when it all fell apart. Pride had kept her from writing to them even after James died. She would not prove them right by crawling back in defeat. I do not know, she admitted finally. I was hoping to find work somewhere, but I may need to try the next town over. Perhaps Margaret Reeves's influence does not extend to Tanapa. Owen made a thoughtful sound. Tanapa is 30 miles through rough country and you would be walking it by the look of things. You have supplies for that, water, protection. I have some bread and cheese in my bag, Penelope said, hearing how inadequate it sounded. I will manage. You will die of exposure before you get halfway there, Owen said bluntly. The desert does not care about your determination. It will kill you just as dead either way. Anger flared in Penelope's chest, hot and sudden. What would you have me do then? Stay here where no one will hire me, where I cannot afford lodging, where every person looks at me like I carry some contagion. I am doing the best I can with the situation I have been given. I am not criticizing you, Owen said, raising his hands in a calming gesture. I am trying to point out that walking into the desert unprepared is not a solution. It is just a different way of giving up. I am not giving up, Penelope said fiercely. I am trying to survive. Owen regarded her for a long moment, then seemed to come to some internal decision. I have a proposition for you, not what you are thinking. he added quickly as Penelope's expression shifted to wary suspicion. "I need help at my place. The ranch, if you can call it that. 20 acres and a handful of horses is more dream than reality right now, but I am building something. I need someone who can cook, help with the gentler work, maybe tend a garden if we can coax anything out of that stubborn ground. I can offer room and board and a small wage." "Nothing fancy, but better than walking into the desert." Penelope stared at him. "You do not know me. Why would you offer me work when no one else in this town will?" "Because you need it and I need help," Owen said simply. "And because I know what it is like to be cast out by people who should know better. I did not grow up in Nevada. I came here 5 years ago from Texas, running from my own set of problems. Sometimes a person just needs someone to give them a chance when the rest of the world has turned its back." There was something in his voice, some echo of old pain that told Penelope he understood more than he was saying. She thought about her options, turning them over in her mind like stones. She could refuse, cling to her pride, and likely die trying to reach the next town. She could accept and risk her reputation further by living on a ranch alone with an unmarried man, though her reputation in Goldfield was already destroyed. Or she could accept and take the chance that Owen Zimmerman was what he appeared to be, someone offering help without hidden motives. "Would there be separate quarters?" she asked carefully. "I will not compromise my principles, regardless of what Margaret Reeves claims about my character." "There is a main house, small but solid, with 2 rooms," Owen said. "You would have one, I would have the other. There is also a barn that is frankly more weatherproof than the house right now, which is where I have been sleeping most nights anyway. I am not looking for anything beyond honest work and fair pay, Mrs. Reeves. You have my word on that." Penelope searched his face for any sign of deception and found none. His gaze was direct, his posture open. He looked like a man who worked hard, who had been knocked down by life, but had gotten back up. She recognized that quality because she was trying desperately to embody it herself. "All right," she said. "I accept your offer, Mr. Zimmerman. When would you like me to start?" "Call me Owen, and you can start by riding out to the ranch with me this afternoon," he said. "I have a wagon out back. Fair warning, the place is rough. I have been focused on getting the barn and fencing up, so the house is pretty bare. But it has a roof that does not leak much, and the stove works." "It sounds like paradise compared to sleeping in the street," Penelope said with more honesty than she intended. Something shifted in Owen's expression, a softening around his eyes. "Then let us get you settled. I just need to finish up a few things here and we can head out." The ride to Owen's ranch took just over an hour along a dirt track that wound through the sagebrush-dotted landscape. The afternoon sun blazed overhead, turning the distant mountains purple and gold. Penelope sat beside Owen on the wagon seat, her carpetbag at her feet, watching the vast emptiness of Nevada spread out around them. It was so different from Ohio, where trees and green fields had provided a sense of enclosure, of safety. Here, the land seemed to go on forever, indifferent to human presence. Owen did not talk much during the drive, but the silence was not uncomfortable. He pointed out landmarks, a distinctive rock formation, a dry creek bed that ran with water during the spring melt, the boundaries of what he hoped would eventually be his range eland. Penelope found herself relaxing slightly, the tension of the morning beginning to drain away. Whatever happened next, at least she was not standing lost in the middle of Goldfield with nowhere to go. The ranch, when they reached it, was indeed rough. The house was a simple rectangular structure with weathered wooden walls and a slanted roof. The barn was larger and looked newer, built with obvious care. Fencing enclosed several paddocks, and Penelope could see 5 horses grazing in the largest one, their coats gleaming in the afternoon light. "Those are my foundation stock," Owen said, following her gaze. "3 mares, a gelding and a young stallion I have high hopes for. I am trying to breed horses suited for this country, tough, smart, able to handle the heat and the rough terrain. If I can build a reputation for quality animals, I can make a real go of this place." There was pride in his voice and passion. Penelope recognized the tone of a man with a dream, and it reminded her painfully of James and his excitement about the silver mine. But she pushed that thought aside. This was different. Owen was building something with his own hands, not depending on the luck of what lay hidden in the earth. Owen helped her down from the wagon, and she was acutely aware of the strength in his hands, the careful way he made sure she was steady before releasing her arm. He grabbed her carpetbag and gestured toward the house. "Let me show you inside. Like I said, it is not much." The interior was dim and spare. The front room held a cast iron stove, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, and a few shelves holding basic supplies. A doorway led to 2 small bedrooms, each containing a narrow bed and little else. But the floors were swept clean, and the windows, though dusty, let in good light. It was the home of a man who spent most of his time working outside, but it had good bones. "This room would be yours," Owen said, indicating the one on the left. "I will move my things to the other one, though honestly, I have been sleeping in the barn loft most nights where it is cooler. There are sheets and blankets in the trunk at the foot of the bed. I know it is not fancy." "It is fine," Penelope said, and meant it. The room was clean and private, and the bed looked sturdy. After thinking she might be sleeping under a bush by nightfall, this seemed almost luxurious. "Thank you, Owen, truly. I know you are taking a risk helping me this way. If Margaret Reeves finds out, she might cause trouble for you too." Owen shrugged. "Margaret Reeves already does not like me. I refused to sell her husband a horse last year because I could see he was the type to beat an animal when it did not perform to his expectations. She took offense to that. So I figure I do not have much to lose and you have everything to gain." He set her carpetbag on the bed and stepped back. "Get yourself settled. I am going to tend to the horses and then I will start on supper. Unless you want to take that over. I warn you, I am a terrible cook." "Functional but terrible." "I can cook," Penelope said. "If you show me what supplies you have, I will make something for both of us." Owen's face brightened. "Now that is the best offer I have had all month. The pantry is those shelves in the main room, and there is a root cellar out back with potatoes, onions, and some other odds and ends. Make whatever you want from whatever you find. I am not particular." After he left, Penelope stood in the small bedroom, letting the reality of her situation settle over her. She was miles from town, on a remote ranch, with a man she had met only hours ago. By conventional standards, she should be terrified or at least deeply uncomfortable. Instead, she felt something she had not experienced in months, a fragile sense of possibility. This was not the life she had imagined, not even close. But it was a life, and it was hers to shape. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses on pegs in the wall, arranging her hairbrush and the small daguerreotype of her parents on a shelf. Then she went to explore the pantry. Owen had not been wrong about his supplies being basic: flour, cornmeal, salt, coffee, beans, a bit of bacon, some canned tomatoes. But it was enough. Penelope had learned to make do with less during her time in Goldfield. She found potatoes and onions in the root cellar as promised, along with some carrots and a few withered apples. She could make a decent stew. She got the stove going, grateful that at least she knew how to manage the temperamental things, and set to work chopping vegetables. The familiar motions were soothing, giving her hands something to do while her mind processed the events of the day. Through the window, she could see Owen working with one of the horses, leading it around the paddock with patient persistence. The horse was young and clearly still learning, shying at shadows, but Owen did not rush or force. He just kept walking, kept encouraging, kept trying. There was something compelling about watching him work, about the quiet confidence he brought to the task. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the stew was bubbling on the stove and filling the house with rich, savory smells. Owen came in, dusty and tired, and stopped short when he caught the scent. "That smells incredible," he said. "I cannot remember the last time this place smelled like an actual home." "It is just stew," Penelope said, but she felt a small glow of satisfaction. It was good to be useful again, to have purpose beyond simply enduring. They ate at the small table as darkness fell outside. Owen lit a kerosene lamp, and its soft glow made the rough room seem almost cozy. He asked her questions about her life before Goldfield, and she found herself talking about Ohio, about her childhood on the outskirts of Cincinnati, about the strictness of her parents and the suffocating propriety they had demanded. She told him about meeting James at a church social, about his stories of the West and the opportunities waiting there, about the reckless courage it had taken to defy her family and board the train with him as his bride. "You regret it?" Owen asked, "leaving everything behind for him?" Penelope considered the question carefully. "I regret that he died. I regret that I did not have more time with him, but I do not regret coming west. Even with everything that has happened, I do not regret choosing my own path instead of the one my parents laid out for me. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Owen said. "I left Texas for similar reasons. My father had my whole life planned. I would work his ranch, marry the girl he picked out, produce heirs to carry on the family name. When I said I wanted to start my own place, do things differently, he told me I was an ungrateful fool. When I did it anyway, he told me never to come back." "Have you spoken to him since?" Penelope asked. "No. That was 5 years ago. For all I know, he is dead. He was not young when I left, and he had a mean temper that probably did his heart no favors." Owen pushed his empty bowl away. "I used to think about writing to him, telling him I made something of myself. But then I realized I was not building this place for him. I was building it for me. His approval does not matter anymore." Penelope felt a kinship with this man who understood the pain of family rejection, who had also chosen the hard path of independence. "What happened to your leg?" she asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I apologize. That was rude." "It is fine," Owen said. "Not much of a story. A horse rolled on me 3 years back. The bones healed wrong and now I limp. It does not slow me down much, just gives me trouble when the weather changes." They talked until the lamp burned low, sharing pieces of their histories like trading cards, learning each other through stories. Penelope found Owen easy to talk to, undemanding in his attention. He listened without judgment, laughed without mockery. When she finally excused herself to sleep, claiming exhaustion from the emotional upheaval of the day, she felt something she had not expected: hope. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Penelope rose before dawn to make breakfast, strong coffee and whatever she could improvise from Owen's limited supplies. He was always already up, having tended to the horses' morning feeding. They ate together, planning the day's work, then split off to their respective tasks. Penelope took over the cooking and the house maintenance, grateful to have structure and purpose. She also started a garden plot near the house, determined to coax vegetables from the stubborn Nevada soil. Owen worked with the horses, mended fencing, made the endless repairs that a ranch demanded. He made a weekly trip to Goldfield for supplies, and he always asked Penelope if she wanted to come along. She always refused. She was not ready to face that town again, not ready to see the judgment in people's eyes. Owen never pushed, just returned with the items she had requested and whatever treats he thought might brighten her day. A bag of peppermints, a new book, a packet of seeds for her garden. They worked side by side more often as Penelope grew comfortable with the ranch routine. She learned to groom the horses, to check their hooves for stones, to recognize the signs of illness or injury. Owen was a patient teacher, showing her how to approach the animals calmly, how to read their body language, how to establish trust. She discovered she loved working with the horses, loved their warm breath and soft noses, the way they nickered in greeting when she appeared with treats. One evening in late November, they were finishing the supper dishes when Owen said casually, "I had a letter from a ranch down near Carson City. They are interested in buying 2 of my mares. It is good money, and it would help me buy a better stallion to improve my breeding program." "That is wonderful," Penelope said, genuinely pleased for him. "You have worked so hard for this." "The thing is, they want me to deliver the horses personally so they can see how they have been trained and handled," Owen continued. "It would mean being gone for about a week, maybe 10 days. I wanted to make sure you would be all right here alone before I committed to it." Penelope paused in drying the plate in her hands, alone on the ranch for over a week. The thought sent a flutter of nervousness through her, but also a strange thrill. She had been dependent on others her whole life, her parents, then James, now Owen. The idea of managing on her own, even temporarily, felt like both a challenge and an opportunity. "I will be fine," she said firmly. "I know how to care for the horses, and you will leave me with supplies. I am not afraid of being alone." Owen studied her face. "It is isolated out here. If something went wrong, you would be miles from help." "Things could go wrong anywhere," Penelope countered. "You have taught me well. I can handle whatever comes up for a week or so." A smile tugged at Owen's mouth. "You are tougher than you look, Penelope Reeves." "I am tougher than I thought I was," she admitted. "This place has taught me that." Owen left 3 days later, leading the 2 mares behind his wagon. Penelope stood in the yard, watching him disappear down the track, and felt a surprising pang of loneliness. In the 2 months she had been at the ranch, Owen had become a fixture in her life, steady and reliable. His presence had been a comfort she had not fully appreciated until it was absent, but she squared her shoulders and turned back to the house. She had work to do. The remaining horses needed care, the garden needed tending before the winter frosts came, and there were a dozen small tasks around the ranch that needed attention. She threw herself into the work, finding satisfaction in her own competence. She could do this. She was doing this. The first 2 days passed without incident. Penelope established her own routine, rising with the sun, working until her muscles ached, falling into bed exhausted each night. The silence was profound after dark, just the wind and the occasional cry of a coyote in the distance. She found it peaceful rather than frightening, a vast quietness that let her thoughts settle. On the 3rd day, one of the mares, the oldest of Owen's remaining horses, began showing signs of distress. Penelope noticed her standing separate from the others, head lowered, refusing to eat. When she approached, she could see the mare's sides were slightly distended, and her breathing seemed labored. Penelope felt panic flutter in her chest. She did not know enough about horse medicine to diagnose the problem, let alone treat it. But giving in to fear would not help the animal. She forced herself to think through what Owen had taught her. Check for obvious injuries first. She ran her hands over the mare's legs, finding nothing broken or swollen. Check for colic. one of the most common and dangerous ailments in horses. The mare's stomach felt hard and tight, and she was not passing manure. Colic. Penelope remembered Owen talking about it, remembered him saying that keeping the horse moving was crucial, that you could not let them lie down and give up. She fashioned a lead rope and began walking the mare around the paddock, talking to her in a low, soothing voice, refusing to let her stop despite the animal's clear distress. For hours, Penelope walked that mare. Her own legs ached, her back screamed in protest, but she kept going. She had lost so much already. She would not lose this horse through ignorance or giving up. As evening approached, the mare finally passed gas, then manure, and Penelope nearly wept with relief. The crisis was over. She led the mare to water, let her drink sparingly, then settled her in a stall with a small amount of hay. The horse nuzzled her hand weakly, and Penelope pressed her forehead to the warm neck. "You are going to be fine," she whispered. "We both are." That night, she slept in the barn loft, wanting to be close in case the mare took a turn for the worse. But the horse recovered steadily, and by morning she was nickering for breakfast with the others. Penelope had saved her. She had faced a crisis alone and come through it. The realization filled her with a fierce pride. When Owen returned 8 days after leaving, Penelope was in the garden, pulling up the last of the carrots before the hard freeze came. She heard the wagon and looked up, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. He was back, and the sight of him sent a jolt of pure gladness through her that caught her off guard. Owen climbed down from the wagon, moving stiffly from days of travel, and walked toward her. "How did it go?" he called. "Any problems?" "Just one," Penelope said, standing and brushing dirt from her skirt. "The old mare had colic a few days ago, but I walked her through it and she is fine now." Owen stopped in his tracks. "You handled colic alone." "I did what you taught me," Penelope said. "It was frightening, but I managed." Something fierce and bright flickered in Owen's eyes. He closed the distance between them in 3 long strides and pulled her into a hug, surprising them both. "That is incredible, Penelope. Colic can kill a horse in hours. You saved her life." Penelope stood frozen in his embrace for a heartbeat, then relaxed into it. Owen smelled of dust and horses and sun-warmed leather. His arms were strong around her, solid and safe. She realized it was the first time anyone had hugged her since James died, the first friendly touch in months of isolation. Something in her chest cracked open, and she felt tears prick her eyes. Owen must have felt her trembling because he pulled back, his hand still on her shoulders, concern creasing his face. "Are you all right? Did I hurt you?" "No," Penelope managed. "I am fine. I am just not used to anyone being proud of me." Owen's expression softened into something she could not quite read. "Then people have not been paying attention. You are one of the strongest people I have met, Penelope. You just keep getting knocked down and you just keep getting back up." "I learned from a good example," she said, meeting his eyes. They stood like that for a long moment, something unspoken shifting in the air between them. Then Owen cleared his throat and stepped back, releasing her shoulders. "I should tell you about the sale. It went well. They loved the mares and paid top price. I have enough now to buy that stallion I have been eyeing and still have some left over. I was thinking we could improve the house a bit, maybe get a real cook stove instead of that temperamental monster, add some furniture, make it more comfortable." "This is your ranch, Owen," Penelope said. "You do not need my approval for improvements." "It is your home too," Owen said firmly. "For as long as you want it to be, your opinion matters. Your home." The words settled into Penelope's heart like seeds taking root. She had not thought of any place as home since leaving Ohio. The house she had briefly shared with James had always felt temporary, borrowed. But here, on this rough ranch in the Nevada desert, working beside a man who treated her as an equal. She was beginning to feel something she had almost forgotten: belonging. Winter came to the high desert in earnest, bringing bitter cold nights and occasional snow that melted by midday under the relentless sun. Owen made good on his promise to improve the house. He installed a new stove that heated evenly and did not smoke. He built shelves and a proper cupboard for the kitchen area. He even surprised Penelope with a rocking chair that he had made himself, the wood sanded smooth and fitted together with careful precision. "For the evenings," he said, almost shyly. "I noticed you like to read after supper, and that hard chair cannot be comfortable." Penelope ran her hand over the smooth armrest, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It is beautiful, Owen. You did not have to do this." "I wanted to," he said simply. They fell into evening routines as the days grew shorter. After supper and chores, they would sit near the stove, Owen carving or mending tack, Penelope reading aloud from whatever book she was working through. Sometimes they talked instead, sharing stories and observations, comfortable in each other's company. Penelope found herself watching Owen more often, noticing the way lamplight caught in his hair, the strength of his hands as he worked, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. She was falling in love with him. The realization hit her one evening in January as she watched him laughing at something she had read, his whole face alight with amusement. She loved his steadiness, his kindness, the way he treated her as capable rather than fragile. She loved the life they were building together, the partnership they had formed. But the knowledge terrified her. James had been dead less than 6 months. What would people say if they knew she had feelings for another man so soon? And what did Owen feel? He had never treated her as anything but a friend and coworker. The hug after her return had been an isolated moment of emotion, never repeated. Perhaps she was reading too much into his kindness, seeing what she wanted to see because she was lonely and he was there. Penelope tried to push the feelings down, to ignore the way her heart lifted when Owen smiled at her, the way she found excuses to work near him, the way she lay awake at night thinking about him in the next room. But love, once acknowledged, was difficult to suppress. In February, a late winter storm blew in, dumping several inches of snow and bringing winds that howled around the house like living things. Owen brought the horses into the barn for shelter and made sure the house was battened down tight. By evening, the temperature had plummeted, and even with the stove going full blast, cold seeped through the walls. "You should sleep in the main room tonight," Owen said as they finished a supper of beans and cornbread. "It will be warmer near the stove. I will sleep in the barn with the horses." "You will freeze out there," Penelope protested. "The barn is not insulated." "I have slept in worse," Owen said. "I will bundle up in the hay loft. I have done it before." "That is ridiculous," Penelope said firmly. "You will stay in the house. We are both adults. We can share the space near the stove without impropriety." Owen looked like he wanted to argue, but another gust of wind rattled the windows, and he conceded. They brought blankets and pillows from their rooms, making pallets on the floor near the stove's warmth. The situation felt strange and intimate, lying so close in the flickering firelight but also comforting. The storm raged outside, but inside they were safe and warm. "Can I ask you something personal?" Owen said into the darkness. "Of course," Penelope replied, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. "You still love him?" "James?" The question hung in the air. Penelope thought about it carefully before answering. "I loved who James was and who I was when I was with him, but I have changed so much since he died. I think if he came back somehow, we would be strangers to each other now. The girl he married does not exist anymore." "That does not really answer my question," Owen said gently. I will always care about him, Penelope said slowly. He was kind to me and we had plans and dreams together. But I am not mourning him the way I thought I would. I am not sure what that says about me. It says you are moving forward, Owen said. That you have not let grief consume you. There is no shame in that. My mother-in-law would disagree, Penelope said with a bitter laugh. Your mother-in-law is a miserable woman who wants everyone around her to be miserable too, Owen said bluntly. Her opinion is worth less than nothing. Penelope smiled despite herself. You have a way of putting things into perspective. Can I ask you something else? Owen's voice was quieter now, more hesitant. Yes. If you could have any life you wanted, what would it be? If you could wake up tomorrow and everything was exactly how you wished, what would that look like? Penelope considered lying, deflecting, but something in the intimacy of the moment made her want to be honest. I think it would look a lot like this, she said carefully. A place where I am useful and valued, work that challenges me. Someone who treats me as an equal partner rather than a pretty ornament or a burden. I spent my whole life being told what I should want instead of figuring out what I actually want. I like who I am becoming here. She could hear Owen breathing in the darkness, could almost feel him thinking. Finally, he said, I am glad you are here, Penelope. I do not know if I have said that clearly enough. This place, my whole life, is better with you in it. Penelope's heart hammered in her chest. Owen. I am not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know you need time. I know you might never see me as more than a friend or an employer. But I wanted you to know that if you ever did, if you ever wanted more, I would be honored. You have found your home here, Penelope, if you want it. Not just the ranch, but with me. The words she had not let herself hope to hear hung in the air between them. Penelope's throat tightened with emotion. I am afraid, she whispered. I am afraid of what people would say. I am afraid it is too soon. I'm afraid of losing something else I care about. I am afraid too, Owen admitted. But I think building something real is worth being afraid for. Penelope thought about the girl she had been, obedient and proper, living according to other people's rules. That girl had been cast out and left to survive alone. The woman she was becoming did not need anyone's permission to live her life. If she wanted Owen, if she felt love growing between them, why should she deny it because of arbitrary rules about mourning periods and propriety? I think I am falling in love with you, she said into the darkness, her voice trembling but clear. I think I have been for a while, and I have been trying not to acknowledge it because it seemed wrong. But nothing about how I feel when I am with you feels wrong. It feels right in a way nothing else ever has. She heard Owen move, then his hand found hers in the darkness, warm and solid. I have loved you since the day you saved that mare, he said. Watching you face that challenge alone, seeing your strength and determination, I knew you were someone extraordinary. Someone I wanted beside me for whatever comes next. Penelope shifted closer, and Owen put his arm around her, pulling her against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. This was where she belonged. Not in Ohio, trying to be someone her parents approved of. Not in Goldfield, playing the role of proper widow for people who did not care about her. Here, in the circle of Owen's arms, building a life on their own terms. We do not have to rush anything, Owen said softly. We can take whatever time you need. I just wanted you to know how I feel. I have needed time, Penelope said. These months here have given me time to heal, to figure out who I am without someone else defining me. And I know now that I want to move forward, with you, if you will have me. Owen pulled back just enough to look at her face in the firelight. His eyes were bright with emotion. Are you sure? I do not have much to offer. A rough ranch, hard work, an uncertain future. You offer yourself, Penelope said. Your partnership, your respect, your trust, that is worth more than all the certainty in the world. Owen cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. Then yes, I will have you, in whatever way you will give yourself. Now, next year, whenever you are ready. Penelope leaned forward and kissed him, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened as Owen responded. It was different from kissing James, different from anything she had experienced before. This kiss tasted of new beginnings, of conscious choice rather than youthful rebellion. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "We should probably stop there for tonight," Owen said roughly. "I want to do this properly, Penelope. I want to marry you if you will agree to it. I want everything to be right." "You want to marry me?" Penelope asked, her heart soaring. "More than I have wanted anything in my life," Owen said. "But you should have a proper courtship, a chance to be sure." "I do not want you to have regrets." "I will not have regrets," Penelope said. "But I appreciate you wanting to do this right, so we will court properly." "How does that work when we are already living together on a remote ranch?" Owen laughed, the sound rich and warm. "I have no idea. I suppose we will figure it out as we go." They lay down again, this time with Penelope tucked against Owen's side, his arm secure around her. The storm howled outside, but inside they were warm and together, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Penelope felt completely safe. The courtship that followed was unconventional but deeply romantic. Owen brought Penelope wildflowers when they started blooming in early spring, entire handfuls of the desert's rare color. He carved her a jewelry box and filled it with small treasures. A piece of turquoise he found while mending fence, a perfect bird feather, a smooth stone from the creek. He took her on long rides through the sagebrush on their gentlest mare, showing her the beauty of the landscape, teaching her to see what he loved about this harsh country. Penelope, for her part, learned to braid Owen's hair back when it got too long and he was putting off a trip to town. She mended his clothes with careful stitches and added small embellishments, flowers embroidered on cuffs, his initials on pocket flaps. She made his favorite meals and laughed at his jokes and sat with him in the evenings, planning their future. They talked about everything, what they would do with the ranch, how many horses they hoped to eventually have, whether they wanted children. Owen admitted he wanted a family, several children if they were blessed, raised with the freedom he had never known as a boy. Penelope found she wanted that too, wanted to create something different from the rigid household she had grown up in. In April, Owen made a trip to Goldfield for supplies and returned with a small gold band he had purchased from the jeweler. That evening, as the sun set in streaks of gold and crimson, he proposed properly, down on one knee in front of the house they had made into a home. "Penelope Reeves, you are the strongest, kindest, most remarkable woman I have ever known," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Will you marry me? Will you be my partner and my wife and help me build this life we have been dreaming about?" "Yes," Penelope said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, catching the light like a promise. Then he stood and kissed her, and Penelope felt joy expand in her chest until she thought she might burst with it. She had been cast out, labeled cursed, left to fend for herself, and she had not just survived. She had found something better than anything she had lost. They married in May of 1888, in a small ceremony in Carson City, where no one knew their histories or cared about mourning periods or propriety. Owen wore a new suit, and Penelope wore a dress she had sewn herself from fabric Owen had purchased, a soft blue that matched the spring sky. A justice of the peace officiated, and two strangers off the street served as witnesses. It was simple and perfect. The wedding night was tender and passionate, both of them nervous and eager, learning each other's bodies with reverence and joy. Owen was patient and attentive, making sure Penelope felt cherished every moment. Afterward, lying tangled together in the hotel bed, Penelope thought about the journey that had brought her here. All the pain, all the loss had led to this. A man who loved her completely, a life they would build together, a future full of possibility. They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, and life continued with a new sweetness coloring everything. Owen's horse business grew steadily. Word spread about the quality of his animals, their training and temperament, and buyers began seeking him out. Penelope managed the household and helped with the horses, and together they expanded the ranch bit by bit, adding paddocks and improving the house, making it comfortable. In October, nearly a year after Owen had first offered Penelope refuge, she realized her monthly courses were late. By November, there was no denying the signs. The tenderness in her breasts, the waves of nausea, the exhaustion. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with equal parts excitement and terror. She told Owen one evening after supper, simply and directly, "I am going to have a baby. Sometime in late spring, I think." Owen went very still, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. Then a smile spread across his face, so wide and genuine it transformed him. "Truly, we are going to have a child, truly," Penelope confirmed, and then she was in his arms, both of them laughing and crying at once. The pregnancy was not easy. The desert winter seemed harsher than the year before, and Penelope struggled with sickness and fatigue. But Owen was unfailingly supportive, taking over more of the heavy work, making sure she rested, treating her like she was made of glass. It drove her slightly crazy, but she also found it touching, this evidence of how much he cared. In May of 1889, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, attended by a midwife from Goldfield whom Owen had hired despite Penelope's misgivings about anyone from that town. But the woman was professional and skilled, and she saw them through safely. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Penelope wept with relief and overwhelming love. "What should we name him?" Owen asked, cradling the tiny bundle with unexpected competence for someone who had never held a baby before. "Something strong," Penelope said. "Something that will remind him he comes from people who do not give up." They named him Samuel, after no one in particular, just because they liked the sound of it, and it seemed to fit. Samuel Zimmerman, born into a world of dust and sage, horses and hard work, but also love and partnership and the freedom to become whoever he chose to be. The first year of Samuel's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small miracles. Penelope discovered depths of patience she had not known she possessed, and Owen proved to be a devoted father, getting up with the baby in the night, walking Samuel around the paddock during fussy evenings, singing off key lullabies that somehow always worked. By the time Samuel was walking, Penelope was pregnant again. Their daughter, Emily, was born in the spring of 1891, an easier birth that left Penelope convinced she could handle a large family after all. Emily was quieter than Samuel had been, a serious baby who watched everything with wide, thoughtful eyes. The ranch prospered as the children grew. Owen's reputation as a horse breeder became established throughout Nevada, and orders came from as far away as California. They hired a young man named Tom to help with the work, and later a woman from Tonopah to assist Penelope with the house and children when things got overwhelming. The tiny ranch Owen had started with such hope expanded into something substantial and successful. In 1893, Margaret Reeves died of pneumonia. Owen heard about it on one of his supply runs to Goldfield and debated whether to even tell Penelope. but she had been firm that she wanted to know anything related to that chapter of her life, so he told her that evening. Penelope felt a complicated rush of emotions: relief, lingering anger, and a surprising thread of pity. "I hope she found some peace before the end," she said finally. "She was a deeply unhappy woman who made others suffer for it. But she was also a mother who lost her son, and I understand that pain now that I have children of my own." "You are a better person than she ever was," Owen said, pulling her close. "I just learned to let go of bitterness," Penelope said. "It was poisoning me, and I chose to set it down." She never learned that lesson. In 1895, Penelope gave birth to twins, another boy and a girl they named James and Elizabeth. The naming of the son after her first husband had been Penelope's idea, and Owen had supported it without hesitation. "He was part of your life," Owen said. "Acknowledging that does not diminish what we have. It just shows you are someone who honors what was while still moving forward." The twins were a handful, two whirlwinds of energy who kept everyone constantly busy. But the older children helped, and the ranch had enough income now to afford the assistance they needed. Penelope sometimes looked around at her life, at the 4 children and the thriving ranch and the husband who still looked at her like she was the most remarkable thing he had ever seen, and could hardly believe this was real. One evening in the summer of 1896, nearly 9 years after that day, Owen had found her lost and desperate in Goldfield. They sat on the porch they had added to the house, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. The children were finally asleep, and the rare quiet felt luxurious. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Penelope asked, her hand in Owen's. "If I had tried to walk to Tanapa that day, if you had not offered me work—" "I try not to," Owen admitted. "It is too terrifying. But I also think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be." "I do not know if I believe in fate," Penelope said, "but I believe in choices. I believe we both made choices that led us here, and I would make them all again." "Even the hard ones?" Owen asked. "Even losing James and being cast out?" Penelope thought about the girl she had been, frightened and alone in the dusty street. She thought about the woman she had become, strong and capable and surrounded by love. "Even those," she said. "They made me who I am. They brought me here to you, to this life. I would not trade this for anything." Owen lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I love you, Penelope Zimmerman, more now than the day we married, which I would not have thought possible." "I love you too," Penelope said. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you for telling me I had found my home." "You gave this place a heart," Owen said. "It was just land and buildings and dreams before you. You made it home for both of us." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge one by one in the vast Nevada sky. Somewhere in the house, one of the twins whimpered in sleep, then settled. In the barn, the horses nickered softly to each other. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and possibility. Penelope thought about the future stretching ahead. Children to raise, horses to breed, seasons to weather together. It would not always be easy. The desert was unforgiving. Life on a ranch was hard, and there would be challenges and sorrows mixed with the joys. But they would face it all together, partners in every sense of the word. Years later, when Samuel was grown and thinking about starting his own ranch, he asked his mother what advice she would give. Penelope thought carefully before answering, wanting to give him something true and useful. "The world will try to tell you who you should be," she said finally. "Your family, your community, the expectations of your time. But you have to decide who you actually are and have the courage to live that truth, even when it is hard. Your father and I built this life by refusing to accept what others said we should be. We chose each other and this place and this life on our own terms. That is what I want for you, the freedom to choose and the courage to live with those choices." Samuel had hugged her then, this son who had never known her in her frightened days, who had only ever known her as strong and capable. "You and Pa are the best example I could ask for," he said. "I hope I can build something half as good as what you have." "You will build something entirely your own," Penelope assured him, "and it will be exactly what it needs to be." The ranch continued to prosper through the turn of the century. Owen's horses became legendary in Nevada, known for their toughness and intelligence, bred true to the harsh landscape they called home. Penelope expanded her gardens until they produced enough vegetables to sell in town, and she took quiet satisfaction in returning to Goldfield as a successful woman, rather than the desperate widow who had once fled. The few people who remembered her story looked at her with a mix of shame and respect. Mrs. Henderson, who had turned her out of the boarding house, made a point of apologizing one day in the general store. "I was wrong to listen to Margaret Reeves," she said. "I can see now that you were never cursed. You were just stronger than the rest of us." Penelope accepted the apology graciously, not because she had forgotten the pain of that rejection, but because holding on to anger would only poison her own happiness. She had learned that the hard way, watching Margaret Reeves consume herself with bitterness. Penelope chose differently. In the summer of 1902, they held a celebration for their 15th wedding anniversary and invited everyone they knew. The ranch was transformed with lanterns and decorations, tables groaning with food, music from a fiddle player Owen had hired from town. Their children, ranging from 13-year-old Samuel to the 7-year-old twins, ran wild with the other young people, their laughter echoing across the desert evening. As Penelope stood watching the festivities, Owen came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. "How lucky I am," Penelope said simply. "How different my life could have been. How grateful I am that you saw me that day, really saw me when everyone else was looking away." "I saw someone who needed help," Owen said, "but you became so much more than that. You became my everything." Penelope turned in his arms, looking up at his face, lined now with years of sun and work but still the face she loved most in the world. "You told me I had found my home. I did not understand then that you meant yourself as much as this place. But I know now. You are my home, Owen. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." Owen kissed her, soft and sweet, while around them their friends and family celebrated. The desert stars blazed overhead, eternal and indifferent, but here among the lantern light and laughter, Penelope felt the profound rightness of her life. She had been cast out, judged, and abandoned. But she had survived, had thrived, had built something beautiful from the ashes of loss. As the years continued to pass, Penelope and Owen grew old together in the house they had expanded and improved over decades. They watched their children grow, marry, and start their own families. Samuel did start his own ranch, just 20 miles away, and proved to be as skilled with horses as his father. Emily married a doctor and moved to Carson City, but visited often with her growing brood of children. The twins, inseparable as always, bought land together and established a cattle operation that complemented their father's horse breeding. Owen's leg, injured so long ago, troubled him more as he aged, and eventually he had to rely on a cane to get around. But he still went to the barn every morning, still checked on his horses, still oversaw the operation even as his sons and hired hands took over more of the physical work. Penelope's hair turned silver, her hands gnarled with arthritis, but she still tended her garden and managed the household with the same quiet competence she had always brought to every task. On their 25th anniversary in 1913, Owen gave Penelope a leather-bound journal. "I want you to write down your story," he said. "For the grandchildren, so they know where they came from, so they understand that strength is not just about never falling down, but about getting back up every time." Penelope did write it, slowly over the next year, filling page after page with the story of the frightened young widow who had been cast out and the cowboy who had offered her refuge. She wrote honestly about the pain and the fear, but also about the love and the joy, about building a life on her own terms. When she finished, she showed it to Owen. "This is not just your story," he said after reading it. "This is our story. The story of what two people can build when they choose each other and refuse to give up." "Then it is a good story," Penelope said, "because it is true." They lived into their 70s, blessed with good health and surrounded by family. The ranch that Owen had started with such hope, that Penelope had helped transform into a thriving enterprise, passed eventually to Samuel, who ran it with the same dedication his parents had shown. But Owen and Penelope remained on the land, in the house that held so many memories, unwilling to leave the place where they had found each other. On a cool evening in October of 1922, 35 years after that day in Goldfield, Owen and Penelope sat on their porch as they had countless times before, watching the sunset. Owen's breathing had been labored lately, his heart not as strong as it once was. But he insisted on this ritual, this daily acknowledgement of the beauty they had chosen to build their lives around. "If I could go back," Owen said quietly, "and give that young man advice, the one who limped into his stable to find a lost woman by the water trough, do you know what I would tell him?" "What?" Penelope asked, holding his hand. "I would tell him to trust his instincts, to not second-guess the decision to offer help, because that moment, that simple choice, led to the best life I could have imagined. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Penelope." "We were the best thing that happened to each other," Penelope corrected gently. "We saved each other, Owen. I needed rescuing from circumstances, but you needed someone to share your dreams with to help you build something lasting. We fit together." "We did," Owen agreed. "We do." He died peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks later, his heart simply stopping in the night. Penelope woke to find him still beside her, his face peaceful, his hand still resting on hers. She did not cry immediately, just lay there remembering every moment they had shared, every laugh and tear and ordinary day that had woven together into an extraordinary life. At his funeral, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and the community they had helped build, Penelope spoke about the man Owen had been. "He saw people," she said simply, "not their circumstances or their mistakes or what society said they should be. He saw who they truly were and treated them accordingly. He saw me when I was invisible to everyone else, and he gave me not just a home, but the chance to become who I was meant to be. That was his gift, and I will carry it with me for whatever time I have left." Penelope lived another 7 years after Owen's passing, remaining sharp and active until the very end. She spent her days tending a smaller version of her beloved garden, playing with her great-grandchildren, and adding to the journal she had started, recording the final chapters of the story Owen had asked her to tell. On the last page, written in slightly shaky handwriting just days before her own death in the spring of 1929, she wrote, "I was cast out for losing my husband, labeled cursed and unfit by people who should have shown compassion. But a cowboy named Owen Zimmerman looked at me and said, 'You have found your home.' He was right in ways neither of us fully understood at the time. I found my home in him, in the life we built, in the love we shared. I was not cursed. I was blessed beyond measure. And now, at the end of my days, I go to him with no regrets, only gratitude for every moment we had together. This is how our story ends, with love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. May those who read this understand that home is not a place. It is the people who choose to stand beside you when everyone else walks away. Owen was my home and I was his, and that made all the difference. She died peacefully in her sleep, in the room she had shared with Owen, in the house they had made together, on the land that had witnessed their entire story. Her children found the journal and read it, tears streaming down their faces as they discovered depths of their parents' story they had never fully known. They shared it with their own children, and it became a family treasure, passed down through generations, a reminder of where they came from and what love, real love, looked like. The ranch continued under Samuel's management and eventually passed to his children. But the little house where it all began was preserved, kept as it had been in Owen and Penelope's time, a testament to the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. Visitors would come sometimes, descendants and family friends, to see where the story had unfolded, to walk the same ground where a desperate widow and a limping cowboy had found each other and built something that lasted long after they were gone. The desert remained unchanged, harsh and beautiful and indifferent. But in that small pocket of land, carved out of the wilderness through sheer will and partnership, something extraordinary had flourished. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but a love story for the ages. Proof that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we need to be. Penelope had been cast out, stripped of everything she thought defined her. But in losing everything, she had found something better: authentic love, true partnership, and the freedom to become who she was always meant to be. Owen had been running from his own past, building a dream he thought he would pursue alone. But in offering kindness to a stranger, he had found the missing piece that made his dream complete. Their story, recorded in that leather journal and in the memories of everyone who knew them, became legend in their family. It was told to children at bedtime, to young couples facing their own challenges, to anyone who needed reminding that the end of one chapter is often the beginning of something even better. The words Owen spoke that first day, offering Penelope not just work but belonging, echoed through the years. You have found your home. It was a promise he kept for 35 years of marriage, and Penelope honored it for the 7 years she survived him, never leaving the place where they had built their life together. Even after both were gone, their home remained, a physical reminder of what two people can create when they refuse to let circumstances define them. In the end, theirs was a story about transformation, about finding love in the aftermath of loss, about building something lasting from broken pieces. It was a story about the Wild West, but not the romanticized version of cowboys and outlaws. It was about the real West, where survival required grit and determination, where communities could be cruel but individuals could show extraordinary kindness, where the harsh landscape demanded that you either became strong or perished. Penelope Reeves became Penelope Zimmerman and found her home. Owen Zimmerman found his partner and completed his dream. Together, they proved that sometimes being cast out is not an ending but a beginning, that losing everything can be the first step toward finding what you truly need, and that home is not a place you arrive at but a life you build with someone who sees you truly and loves you anyway. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the lessons learned on that Nevada ranch. The importance of kindness, the value of partnership, the courage it takes to build a life on your own terms. They carried forward the love that had started on a desperate October day in 1887, when two broken people found each other and decided to heal together. And in the high desert, under the vast Nevada sky, the land remembered. The house stood witness. The wind carried whispers of their story across the sage. And somewhere in the space between earth and heaven, Owen and Penelope were together again, home at last in the love that had defined and sustained them through every challenge, every triumph, every ordinary beautiful day of the life they chose to build together. This was their story, complete and whole, a legacy of love that lasted far beyond their years. It began with casting out and ended with coming home, and everything in between was the extraordinary journey of two people who refused to give up on themselves or each other. It was a Wild West love story, true and lasting, proof that the best romances are not about grand gestures but about daily choices, about showing up, about building something lasting one day at a time. And so the story ended where all good stories should, with love triumphant, with family thriving, with a legacy that would endure for generations. Penelope had been cast out for losing her husband, but a cowboy named Owen had told her she had found her home, and in doing so, he had given her back her life. Together, they had created something beautiful from hardship, something lasting from loss, and their story would be told and retold, a testament to the transformative power of love, partnership, and the courage to begin again.